So I wanted, before we get started, to let everyone know that I have a new podcast out, and it's called Meditations. If you like the Meditations segment of this current podcast, you'll like the Meditations podcast. It's nothing but 20 minutes of meditative sounds. And now, on with the podcast.
Americans love scenery. We want to see it all, from one coast to the next, Mount Rushmore down to the Everglades. So hop into a Chevy Malibu and take the scenic route. It's the car you knew America could build. There's a place where people count on friendships they can trace back generations, where they can count on the same stool at the coffee shop waiting for them every morning. This place is called Glen Ellen, and you can find it in every bottle of Glen Ellen wine. This is craft brewed Herman Joseph's, the smoothest, easiest drinking specialty beer in the entire solar system. And I believe you'll find drinkable in the dictionary right after don't order a beer you can't drink. Zoingo! Boingo! The freestyle pogo with more boing, more bounce. Bounce further, bounce higher with Zoingo Boingo. To see what makes Arrowhead Mountain Spring water different from those other waters, you have to go back to the source. And with Arrowhead, that means going back a little farther and longer than most. Between security challenged and security strengthened, there's one important word: how. And it is the how that makes all the difference to our nation and our world. Lockheed Martin. We never forget who we're working for. What makes Kraft singles so good? 2 out of every 3 kids don't get the recommended amount of calcium. But with Kraft singles, they get a good source of calcium and the taste they love. Kraft singles. Magic every single time. Throw boring overboard with a new real meal from Long John Silver's. A meal worthy of a plate. Just $4.99. Only at Long John Silver's. We may not all be geniuses, but we can all do something smart. Introducing the Hyundai 199 Sonata Lease. It's a smart deal on a really smart car.
Remember your cousin in China? He got 15 years work experience. He's 9. How's that even possible? Because he does 5 jobs at the same time. Master's degree, interns for Google. Timmy got attention deficit disorder and he walked it off. Timmy speaks 6 languages. Only language you speak is failure. Also, why can't you be as handsome as Timmy, huh? He look like Tom Holland. You look like Thank You Next. Okay, at least I didn't fail any exams. Except you think he had books? Timmy learned calculus from the back of milk cartons. In America, you have iPad, you have laptop. He didn't even have electricity. Listening to the lo-fi study beats. If Timmy wanted music, he had to play it. He learned to play Mozart from listening to the McDonald's jingle. Probably not very athletic then. What the hell? Timmy's the captain of his soccer team. We have to play in the 150-degree sun barefoot in the snow. Over here, you bump into somebody. Oh, ref, that's a foul. Oh, foul. Back in China, we used to roundhouse kick.
Good morning. It's Saturday, Rules Saturday, May the 10th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have no free lunch, effective interpersonal communication, rules for retrogrades, the sovereign child, motivation, meditation, and rules for patriots. All that and more when we get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you. And now there's no free lunch. 250 Economic Truths by David Bahnsen.
Sometimes the law defends plunder and participates in it. Thus, the beneficiaries are spared the shame and danger that their acts would otherwise involve. But how is this legal plunder to be identified? Quite simply, see if the law takes from some persons what belongs to them and gives it to other persons to whom it doesn't belong. See if the law benefits one citizen at the expense of another by doing what the citizen himself cannot do without committing a crime. Then abolish that law without delay. No legal plunder. This is the principle of justice, peace, order, stability, harmony, and logic. Friedrich Bastiat. The principles of identifying and shunning plunder, crony capitalism, and corruption identified by the great Bastiat seem positively naive in today's economy. What should have been abolished in Bastiat's day by this perfectly moral standard is almost par for the course in so much of today's accepted systems. The manipulation of the tax system to punish one actor and benefit another is plunder. The use of the regulatory system to do the same is plunder. Note what is at stake here: justice, peace, order, stability. When the people believe the system and the law itself are used to benefit one favored participant over another, the very peace and harmony of social order break down. No defender of free enterprise can ever let the war against crony capitalism become a secondary concern. It is the very fight for free enterprise itself.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, from the book Effective Interpersonal Communication, Method 12, Sour Sandwich, also known as Leader Method or Commander Method. As the name suggests, the sour sandwich method is the opposite of the sweet sandwich method. Now you might be wondering where and why we would use a method that might potentially hurt others. I don't suggest you should ever hurt anyone. However, in the human world, we keep meeting people who just won't listen to reason, no matter how politely we talk. Also, there are some people who deliberately keep repeating the same action, even though they know full well what they're doing is wrong. And you have tried to tell them exactly that politely several times. For them, awaits a sour sandwich. Sour sandwich is the method you use in argumentative essays. In the first paragraph, you state your point of view. Then, you sandwich your partial agreement with the opposing point of view in the second paragraph. Finally, in the third paragraph, you once again mention your point of view and summarize it. The point is to make the other person see that you are determined to enforce your position and not some pushover who can be constantly ignored and made fun of. At the same time, you show your power in a polite way and don't resort to crude methods like shouting and cursing. Sour sandwich can be used in two situations: when you have to deal with someone in a polite but firm hand, when you need to convince others that your opponent is in the wrong. First, let's see an example in the first situation. Helena is secretary to Becky. She keeps leaving Becky's office door open, no matter how many times Becky tells her to shut it. Becky is worried as the air conditioner's coolness gets wasted, and as a result, she will be charged more on the electricity bill. One day, as Helena has just left, again without shutting the door, Becky calls her back and says, "Helena, I've told you to shut the door so many times, yet you never do it." Okay, somebody can forget one time. I understand we're all human. But after that, one needs to reflect and change. Making the same mistake repeatedly means you aren't being responsible. Every position demands its responsibility. Nothing in this world is for free. There are a lot of poor people who would give anything to be in your position. When God has given you more than them, the least you can do is be grateful for it by proving you actually deserve it. Am I wrong? Here, the first paragraph contains the sour truth. The second has an understanding tone, and the third one, again, is sour, hence the method's name. It is worthwhile to note that this method, used in a personal debate like in this case, still contains the risk of giving the opposite outcome from what we want. Instead of making Helena understand and reflect on her mistake, she might take offense. However, the risk is pretty mitigated as compared to bluntly giving a completely sour message or shouting at her. The reason we have to use this method is that not every person appreciates kindness in each and every situation. Sometimes people take it as a sign of weakness, and if you give them enough chances, they become even worse. In this method, you adopt a firm stance, but at the same time, you keep a polite and dignified tone. Moreover, in this case, Becky only used this method after politely telling Helena to shut the door a few times. But when Helena didn't change her behavior, it was imperative that Becky use a stricter approach in order to achieve results. Now, let's see an example of the second situation where this method is used to prove the opponent wrong in front of other people. In the court of the kingdom of Ning, the king and the ministers were once discussing how to deal with a foreign invasion, given the meager strength of the state's armed forces. First, the prime minister gave his view. "Your Majesty, I suggest we should allow all citizens to possess firearms. That way, even if the state army is overwhelmed by a foreign invasion, the citizens would still make the invasion difficult to succeed." Then the interior minister said, "Your Majesty, that is not advisable. That way any rich and powerful person can amass an army and usurp your throne, especially during a war when the army is outside the city fighting invaders." "Who would dare usurp the imperial throne?" replied the prime minister. "Would the ministers and armed civilians allow such treason?" Now for the sour sandwich. The interior minister said, "Your Majesty, it is certainly very counterproductive to allow all citizens to carry guns. Any treasonous subject can easily amass an army, especially if he has foreign help." The prime minister has got a point. It could make a foreign invasion difficult if enough people are willing to take arms against the invader. However, it could equally well make it easy in the event that someone has a private army and supports the invader. This is how dynasties got overturned in the past, because everyone had swords. The first paragraph is sour, meaning it contains the interior minister's own opinion. The second paragraph shows some consideration for the opponent's theory, and the third paragraph is again sour. Here you must have noticed that even though I called this method sour, it doesn't really sound harsh or offensive in the above example. This is because, in this case, as opposed to Helena's case, the debate is public rather than personal. Due to this reason, we don't need to worry too much about hurting our opponent's personal feelings. Therefore, it is more convenient and advisable to use the sour sandwich method as compared to the sweet sandwich method. Using the sweet sandwich method here would essentially mean there is no debate, as you would then be supporting your opponent instead of arguing with him. The advantage of the sour sandwich method is that you do not sound like a biased person who only sees one point of view. You share your view, but at the same time you praise the good points of your opponent's view. You acknowledge that your opponent has got a point in what he says, but he hasn't got the entire picture. This way, you distance yourself from toxic politics, as you don't sound like a lunatic who is hell-bent on disproving everything his opponent says. Instead, you come across as a balanced, mature person who, after viewing all the viewpoints, has arrived at the best conclusion. And that was Method 12, the sour sandwich, from the book, Effective Interpersonal Communications. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, rules for retrogrades.
Rule 32. The monolithic private right-wing so-called boycott of leftist companies is a sham. Gutsier approaches to commercial confrontation are superior. The primary party inconvenienced by badly organized boycotts is the boycotter himself. Moreover, the quiet refraining from patronizing a certain business is no political action at all. Voluble publication of the boycott is a necessary component of increasing its efficacy and momentum. Personally, permanently refraining, for example, from patronizing Starbucks proves utterly futile because, by definition, there is no chance for the boycott to spread to like-minded individuals. On the other hand, boycotts are frequently quite effective if sizable, definite in time period, and well coordinated. But if monolithic, indefinite in duration, or non-orchestrated, they are virtually useless. Now, there is nothing immoral in inefficacy. Many right-wingers adopt household policies involving refraining from consuming Starbucks, for example, which is perfectly fine. We designate such households monolithic boycotters. Such campaigns are simply ineffective and shouldn't be considered the standard for retrogrades, whose watchword is not only principle, but also efficacy. More often than not, the monolithic boycotter proves to be the one, virtue signaling to the retrograde, not the other way around. That is, the lone boycotter is usually the agent of hypocrisy, although it is a counterintuitive thought. Here's why. Generalizing for a moment, the profile of this too-busy-to-get-involved right-winger is that of one who is usually trying to substitute his ineffective private boycott for recognizable real political action against the wicked radical company being taken by retrogrades. Still generalizing, the monolithic boycotter is usually the one on his high horse, rallying against the vastly more effective retrogrades who are actually making a dent, perhaps as they drink coffee. All this adds up to a hypocritical preachiness heard all too often from uninvolved conservatives. Far more effective, if more laboriously orchestrated, techniques and actions against radical corporations are smear campaigns like old-fashioned picketing, aggressive contra articles or commercials, or celebrity interventions. For example, an ad that says, Starbucks supports the following monstrous causes, and then lists them. Damaging ads and published attacks frequently work because global companies prize their brand, which equates to future profits, as highly as they value current profits. When an uninvolved conservative monolithically boycotts, he damages neither the evil company's present profits because billion-dollar companies don't notice the opportunity cost of a cup of coffee, nor its future profits, because the boycotter has done little or nothing to damage the company's brand. The company's evil continues unabated in the face of the monolithic boycott. In the logic of the fight, damaging the radical company's priceless brand is the most effective thing a retrograde can do, even if, for the sake of argument, he's consuming the company's product as he does it. There is little or no contradiction in consuming coffee while attacking the coffee's wicked allocation of profits, because the retrograde never formally cooperates in Starbucks' intents. The best attempt to bring down a radical brand is the direct example, either forcing a change in profit allocation or actively ruining the brand's reputation. Once more, the watchword is not just principle, but efficacious principle. Making needed sacrifices is the most beautiful aspect of the fight. Making needless sacrifices, like refraining from a leftist company's coffee, is one of the silliest. If one is going to fight drawn-out, arduous battles, one needs priorities.
And that was Rule 32 from Rules for Retrogrades, 40 Tactics to Defeat the Radical Left by Timothy J. and David R. Gordon. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we an infant, a universal refrain is she sleeping through the night? People's tolerance for being awakened from sleep varies widely, and for those fortunate souls who don't particularly mind, I suspect this isn't much of an issue. But for many people, being awakened is so disturbing that it is one of the scariest aspects of becoming a parent. Like all problems, this one is solvable, and trying out all manner of tricks, like using white noise, glowing toys, and particular bedding and clothes, are all worth exploring. Nonetheless, these efforts often fail, leaving parents dangling at the end of the rope. At this point, many parents simply consider letting the baby cry it out. This is backed up by the research, most famously the Ferber method. As with so many dehumanizing abstractions, cry it out suggests that babies crying it out is a mechanical process, like a leaf blower running out of gas rather than a person in distress. Unlike the spent leaf blower, when a baby is left to cry herself to sleep, she is left to deal with her problem on her own. A baby crying herself to sleep marks a solution for the parent, but not for the baby. Babies are helpless, and a soothing parent is not some counterproductive crutch. If a crying baby is indeed a person in distress, then research showing an absence of long-term effects is irrelevant. I take ibuprofen for my headaches, even though there are no long-term harms of enduring full-force headache pain. One objection to worrying about a baby's state of mind is that babies don't seem capable of understanding or remembering. They seem like little more than pre-human blobs that we are imagining have more interiority than they really do. This is understandable, but consider the alternative. When during brain development do interior consciousness and rudimentary understanding flip on? My guess is that it's earlier than we think, and probably even before birth. I wouldn't be shocked if some basics of personality became established in the newborn and infancy period. I'm not going to explore the philosophical and neuroscientific features of this argument here. Instead, I take a simple, practical risk assessment. I would rather waste effort accommodating a newborn as if she can think about what's going on than treat her like an unthinking lump when she's not. You could call this taking babies seriously. Until we have some better theories about consciousness and explanatory thinking, this is the most prudent approach. After all, a baby is only a baby for a few months. Is it really asking too much to be extra cautious? If babies are capable of rudimentary understandings, then when a baby cries out at night, they're doing so because they have a problem, not because of some biomechanical reflex. Perhaps they're scared or even have primitive fears about abandonment. Who knows? And who knows if an infant left to cry it out might form some long-lasting ideas about how unreliable their parents are. I wouldn't want to take a chance. I would hate for my child to form dark thoughts about the world because I thought they were too young to think. Babies only have a few simple needs. They didn't choose to come into the world and burden their parents with these needs. Their parents knowingly burden themselves. It seems wrong to signal to a person just beginning life that their needs aren't important. On a practical level, I immediately comfort a crying baby. If this was disrupting my sleep, I would try to take daytime or morning naps, see if I could start work later or extend a parental leave. I would consider hiring a night nanny as the problem might go away in a few weeks. We wanted to bring our babies into bed with us, but this raises the risk of sudden infant death syndrome, and we couldn't get comfortable with that idea. To get around it, we first bought a bassinet that attaches to the side of our bed, so it was easy to drape an arm in to comfort a crying baby. When we had twins, we bought a king-size bed and placed a foldable travel bed between us so the babies could safely share a bed with us. Conclusion. Like eating, sleeping is connected with almost every other thing one does in life. Living well requires adjusting and fine-tuning priorities when things change. Some preferences will conflict and others will complement, and these may swap when things change. Eating and sleeping come to bear on nearly all other preferences, and so they are among the most crucial things to learn about early in life. This learning should be free of confusion, fear, or shame, and arbitrary moralizing. One's preferences around eating and sleeping should be as seamless as those for breathing and walking, although the former are far richer and more dynamic. It is therefore essential that parents not muck up a child's discovery process. And that was the end of chapter 2. And again, garbage. All of it that he's talking about in there, first of all, are arbitrary claims. He has no references at all, not one single reference to support any of his allegations. And so they are completely arbitrary. An arbitrary allegation is when somebody's saying, take my word for it. And you have the option to take their word for it, or you have the option to reject it. Either way. So remember that. It all sounds good, but again, it is an arbitrary claim, and when you really start to think about it, you realize what they're suggesting for children is really rather dangerous. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of motivation.
There is no testimony without a trial. It is supposed to be hard. That rough process is necessary. It's what makes you who you are.
You've got to be flexible, you've got to be versatile, and you've got to be adaptable. You've got to deal with circumstances such as you find them. Why? Because a lot of stuff is going to be thrown at you. Many times you're not going to have time to prepare. Sometimes people come out of nowhere with stuff, and you've got to stand up inside of yourself and handle it. You got to trust that you're going to be all right. You have no evidence to support it. It doesn't make sense. You can't point anything to say, well, this is why. There's no logic in it. There's no way in which you can logically and practically and realistically support it and prove it. That's why you got to have faith and you got to have trust. Somehow, some way, you've got to have that you're going to come through. What is it that will make it worth it for you to face the rejections when you want to give up and things are working against you? What is it that will make it worth it for you to brainstorm and not be intimidated and say, I can do this? What is it that will make it worth it for you to raise the bar on yourself and say, I got some more stuff in me? What is it that will help you get back up again?
You better go inside. You still looking outside for the stuff that's already inside. You still looking for someone to save you when you already your superhero. You looking for some information from somebody when you already got what you need in your head. It's just time for you to get up and be the best version of you.
When you get your butt knocked out, the only way you can get back up is from the inside out.
I got what it takes. I got average skill, but I got phenomenal will. I can. I have the ability to do it. I will. I have the willpower to make it happen. I must. Somebody count on me. Arise. Get your butt up. You don't belong at the bottom, and it's time for you to get your butt from down there. It's time for you to stop being comfortable at the bottom. Get your butt up and get to where you're supposed to be. This ain't time to be whining. This ain't time to be crying. This is time to get focused.
Once you start questioning yourself, you're already lost. Once you start questioning yourself, once you start going into a state of depression, and you start being by yourself, and you start thinking and wondering, once you start wondering, you already lost. Even if you don't believe. You have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in your product. You have to believe in your service. And you have to sell you every day. The biggest sale that I make every day that Les Brown, you can do this. I can beat this. If other people can do it, then it's possible that I can do it. You're going to break records. You're going to do some things when you challenge yourself, when you work on yourself, because you don't get in life what you want, you get in life what you are. If you want to improve your income, you want to improve your circumstances, you want to improve your life, you got to first improve yourself. Spend more time on yourself than what you've been spending. Working on yourself, talking to yourself, overcoming the negative conversation, that inner dialogue that's going on all the time. It's very important. You owe that to yourself. And so learning how to empower yourself, you've got to learn to make a conscious, deliberate, determined effort to stand up inside yourself. Working on yourself, watching that inner dialogue, it will determine the quality of your life. Because you are creating your own production. You are the star of your show. You are the director. You're writing the script. And you will determine whether your life is a smash office hit or flop. You begin to realize that your dream and your gifts have so much meaning and so much value for you till your hunger for them will begin to push you past the fear. Your hunger to have them will give you a special drive. You want to become a risk taker. You want to raise the bar on yourself. Most people won't do that.
Most people are going to think you're weird. They're going to think you're crazy.
People are going to think you're crazy.
Get away from people in your life that's hating. Get away from your family members that ain't ever opened a business. Get away from your family members that ain't ever followed their dream. Get away from them.
Don't expect people to understand you. Don't expect it to make sense to anybody why you've got to do this. There's some people that won't like you. Who do you think you are? You're arrogant. What do you think you can do? You think you can get away with that?
I'm fighting with folks who don't even fight, but they got something to say about how we fight. You're not even fighting. You ain't doing nothing. And for those of us who get up and go out, you got something to say about how we do what we do it. Stop talking to us who perform. Stop critiquing us. Stop telling us what to do and how to do it. Build the kind of life that says, I told you so, without having to say a fucking word. Every fucking negative comment should trigger you into productive action. Every time somebody says something to you, you should go do whatever it is that is going to make them have to eat their words. Right then, right now.
I've had my haters. I've had people who've come against me, who try to sabotage me. I'm like the lion. I'm not the gazelle. I don't need something external to motivate me. I find something within.
That's what lions do. Lions don't cry. Lions don't give up. Lions don't quit. Lions hunt. That's what we do for a living.
I must be the greatest, not because I'm cocky, but I gotta tell myself I'm the best if I'm gonna be the best. I gotta believe in me before anybody else believe in me.
And that was motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of meditation. And that was a little bit of meditation. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, self-censorship.
No, they didn't. No, it wasn't that. They wanted the money now. Like, why would they demonetize me? Because they don't get a cut either. So what they're trying to do, essentially, is get you to fall in line by getting you to self-censor because it benefits you financially. It's a creepy form of censorship because you do it to yourself and it's kind of okay because you can't really prove that they got you to not talk about things you wanted to talk about, and they can't really prove that you followed this public narrative just because you want to keep your job.
You know, often it's
And that was self-censorship. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, what does the phrase, if you're explaining, you're losing, mean? This was said by Ronald Reagan, speaking of political campaigns. From the perspective of your audience, if you have to explain yourself, you come off looking desperate to convince. As a consequence, you lose the high ground. From a more philosophical perspective, if you have a clear conscience and strong conviction towards the positions you take, your values, truth, and direction, you don't need the opinions or consent of others. As a consequence, you don't need to explain yourself. However, if you yourself are not convinced of the validity and truth of your position, or you can't fully justify your choices, then you continue to expel words in an attempt to create the illusion of certainty. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, rules for patriots.
Chapter 12, Conclusion. For a while now, you've suspected your wife hasn't been telling you everything. She's always cared about her appearance, but lately she's been piling on the makeup like she hasn't since you were dating. She showers a lot and takes longer lunches. Her text message alerts on her phone go off, prompting her to giggle and blush. You ask her what's up. Oh, just a friend saying something funny, she says. You even hear her mumbling another man's name in her dreams at night. You know in your gut something is amiss. You suspect a betrayal is happening right under your very nose, but you have loyalty to this relationship. Not to mention the fact you don't want to be made to look the fool, and you're scared of what the endgame is should your suspicions prove to be true. This has been the only life you've ever known. If you confront her and she doesn't want to work through the situation, can you handle living life alone? Are you really going to start dating all over again? Will you ever be able to trust again, even if you were? Not yet ready to wrestle with those questions, you decide to punt and kick the can down the road for now. Essentially, you decide you would prefer to live a lie rather than confront the potential truth. Weeks go by and you pretend to be blissfully ignorant, but in the back of your mind, the lack of intimacy between you and your wife is starting to really gnaw at you, especially since you're pretty convinced another man is rubbing your rhubarb. But again, the thought of confronting the truth is just too painful. Until one day, you come home from work early, and there's a strange car in your driveway. You unlock the front door and are greeted with awkward noises and moaning coming from upstairs. Your instincts have you climbing the stairs to see what's going on when you really don't want to know. The front door to your bedroom is wide open. You reach the top of the stairs and peek through the doorway, only to witness your wife carrying on with another man in the middle of the day in your own bed. Shattered, you say not a word as you descend to the bottom of the stairs. You walk into the family room, looking out the window, pondering your next move. Emotionally, you're a mixture of anger, revolt, and defeat. All of a sudden, you hear the refrigerator door open in the kitchen. But before you walk over to see who it is, you are confronted with the image of a naked man drinking one of your favorite beverages, walking right past you like it's nobody's business. He doesn't even acknowledge you're there, while he sits down in your recliner and leans back to bring the footrest up. He says not a word until he brazenly asks you, "Hey man, do you know where the remote control is?" This is the point of no return grassroots patriots have reached with the current leadership of the Republican Party. Ronald Reagan once famously said, "I didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left me." These days, millions of grassroots patriots around the country feel the same about a Republican Party seemingly hell-bent on abandoning every principle other than crony capitalism. Recently on Fox News, conservative rock star Sarah Palin channeled that frustration when she said, quote, "I love the name of a third party, Freedom Party. And if the GOP continues to back away from the planks in our platform, from the principles that built this party of Lincoln and Reagan, then yeah, more and more of us are going to start saying, you know what? What's wrong with being independent? Kind of with that libertarian streak that much of us have. In other words, we want government to back off and not infringe on our rights. I think there will be a lot of us who start saying, GOP, if you abandon us, we have nowhere else to go except to become more independent and not enlist in one or the other of the private majority parties that rule in our nation, either a Democrat or a Republican. Remember, these are private parties, and no one forces us to be enlisted in either party." Whenever I'm asked about this, and I'm asked about this a lot, I usually say, I'd like to try a second party before thinking about a third one. Venting frustration is one thing. Acting upon it is entirely another. When we're frustrated, there are plenty of things we can justify as a response, but many of those things aren't necessarily prudent. That's why we have the saying, cooler heads prevailed. On the other hand, there is certainly a time and a place to fashion a whip of cords or grab the jawbone of an ass and give him your best Howard Beale. So is it time for us to abandon the GOP or continue to try and reform it? Let's do a cost-benefit analysis before deciding. Number 1, the vision. Here's the cost. With the light of liberty barely a flicker, the absolute worst use of time for conservatives would be essentially starting over to form a third-party movement that may take decades to realize. Given how much freedom, liberty, and morality we've lost, our constitutional republic probably doesn't have decades. We need to do as much good as we can, and we need to do it right now. Benefit. Loyalty to the Republican Party has done nothing to squelch our slouch towards Gomorrah or statism. We've wasted years as it is, propping up neo-statists and gutless rhinos with little to nothing to show for it. Instead of wasting more time on the rotting corpse that is the GOP, better to get to work now on what will inevitably take its place. Short-term thinking is what got us here in the first place. Number 2, political impact. Here's the cost. Leaving the Republican Party would essentially hand almost every election of consequence to the Democrats for the foreseeable future and render conservatives meaningless in the grand scheme of things. Furthermore, if no longer held accountable by conservatives, you'll likely see the Republican Party ruling class openly conspire now with Democrats to continue to grow government, which means liberty will be lost even quicker. This rash move would take us quicker to irrelevancy. Benefit. The Republican Party ruling class is already conspiring with Democrats to grow government, despite our presence. In 2013, they passed the largest tax increase of 20 years. That's just one example. At least if we're no longer covering for these sellouts, we can recover some integrity lost by associating with the tarnished GOP brand and perhaps have an honest conversation with the American people about where we're headed for once. By forming a third party, we become de facto independents, and instead of being taken for granted, we become a crucial swing vote. Number 3, organization. Cost. Sure, there are days when the idea of bolting the GOP sounds great, but it's not feasible. The two most viable right-of-center third parties, the Libertarian and Constitution parties, still don't have consistent ballot access in all 50 states. Good luck recruiting candidates without ballot access. Good luck raising money without candidates. And good luck moving your agenda without money. The reality is the two dominant parties have made this kind of effort almost impossible without unprecedented fundraising / legal effort to build up to it. I don't like it. I wish that weren't the case, but it is what it is. Benefit. That was the same argument used against our founding fathers when they wanted to declare their independence. If there's anything American history has taught us, it's that when we step out on faith and principle, Providence handles the rest. One great way to ignite such an effort is to have leaders with the charisma, vision, and integrity lead the way in inspiring others to act on the courage of their convictions. Maybe some of those leaders will emerge if we step out on faith. Founding fathers like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson became the men we know them as today because they rose to the occasion when history needed them. Number 4, the future. Here's the cost. Most of us would agree the party is broken, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater here. The brokenness of the party reflects the cultural brokenness of the times in which we live. All private organizations are only as good as the people inhabiting them. Any new organization will eventually just develop the same problems that GOP has now. You can't expect a political party to have more moral purity than the culture as a whole. Still, reform is necessary. Instead of reinventing the wheel, why not encourage members of the Constitution and Libertarian parties to infiltrate the GOP? Many local and state Republican Party organizations across the country are in dire need of people. Who says those people can't be people of principle? Let's do to the GOP from the bottom up what the progressives already did to the Democrat Party. There's no reason we can't overrun the party's infrastructure and put our own people in there. Benefit. Some libertarians tried this, and look what the party bosses did to them at the Rules Committee meeting prior to the 2012 convention in Tampa. That was Soviet-style politics. Of course, you can't expect a private organization to be more righteous than the culture, but that actually proves my point. We are aligned with people who don't share our moral value system and have proven they will do things to beat us they would never do to Democrats. And they'll even use Fox News and other conservative media to do it. The time, talent, and treasure wasted on reforming the GOP is like trying to funnel foreign aid for the hungry through a corrupt local warlord. Whatever we send just ends up in his pocket. Let's face it, this whole debate is moot anyway, because the party bosses are in the process of betraying us first. Thus, the longer we wait, the harder it will be to do what we'll eventually have to go ahead and do anyway. Now that you've had a chance to weigh the pros and cons of each side of this argument, it's time for you to decide. I don't know about you, but I don't think this is a clear-cut call. In fact, I see compelling arguments of evidence on both sides. But what if I told you that you may not have to choose? That you might be able to have what amounts to a third party without starting completely over and losing the ground you've already taken? When I pitched the idea of this book to some friends of mine, they were concerned that the other side would read it and then know our playbook and use it against us. But I explained to them that's not possible, because this attack plan only works with our worldview. The reason you don't see too many Republican leaders using these 10 commandments of political warfare, and we've had to cite several of the same names over and over again as examples of Republicans that do, is because most Republican leaders can't use them. They don't have the worldview to use them, so it wouldn't work for them even if they tried. They'd simply be exposed as posers. For these tactics only work for those with conviction. Thus, they have to resort to tactics that look more in line with what the left does than what you just read in this book. If they ever actually deploy any tactics at all, that is, most of the time they don't even do that. They simply wait until their soulless consultants, who are usually dumber than they are, tell them what to think. If you put the commandments in this book to practical use wherever you have influence, you're going to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff real quick like. Whether that's at your state legislature, a town hall hosted by your congressman who's home for recess, your local state party, when you're running for office, or even casual conversation among friends and families. That's one of the things these commandments are meant to do. Here's another thing. For too long, we have mistaken friendlies for friends. Friendlies are people you can align with on a temporary basis when your vested interests are mutual. But those aren't long-lasting relationships. As circumstances change, your friendlies can become your enemies once your vested interests no longer intersect. Now, friends stick closer than a brother. Friends get in a foxhole with you. Friends have your back when the going gets tough. Friends share your convictions and mission. And although at times you may disagree on how best to carry it out, you're both aiming for the same end goal. Most of the Republican leaders we have aligned ourselves with are friendlies, but they are not our friends. This explains why at the time they seem so right on, and at other times so far off. They're so right on when we have mutually beneficial vested interests, and so far off when we don't. Sometimes they'll shield us from the firing squad aiming for us, and then sometimes they'll join it. If they were friends, they'd have the same angst and sense of urgency for our civilization's future that we have. They wouldn't need prodding or pressure to take a stand. We wouldn't have to worry about what will happen the minute we stop hounding them to do the right thing. Increasingly, our friendlies have become less and less friendly. But instead of letting our friendlies use us, why don't we use them? Children see things in extremes, but adults draw distinctions. We need to stop having a childlike relationship with the GOP, where we rely on the party to save America and treat its big names like our favorite athletes. Hey, I'll trade you a Marco Rubio rookie card for a Paul Ryan All-Star. How ridiculous does that sound? Yet, that's often how we've behaved. Political parties prey on that sort of cult of personality, and they encourage it, for it means politics becomes about personalities, not about principles. Personalities are much easier to manipulate. Principled leadership comes with a cost and often requires sacrifices like lives, fortunes, and sacred honor that a ruling class would prefer not to make. Here's my big idea. We don't owe this party any loyalty. I repeat, we don't owe this party any loyalty. One more time, in case you missed it. We don't owe this party any loyalty. They owe us. There would have never been a Reagan era to wax nostalgic about if it weren't for us. The Republican Party was going nowhere fast after the Watergate era until the birth of the conservative movement. The Republican victories of 2010 were done in spite of the party. They didn't want champions like Ted Cruz, remember? We had to drag them kicking and screaming into the winner's circle. The Republican Party didn't make us. We made them. We don't take the orders around here. We give them. Or at least we ought to be. We don't take any sanctimonious lectures from our employees about how half a loaf is better than none or the lesser of two evils. We run the show. So we determine what the acceptable standard is, who met that standard, and how to hold them accountable when they don't meet it. I no longer feel a compulsion to vote for every Republican opposite every Democrat, and I haven't voted straight ticket Republican in years. I came to realize that's the coward's way out. Doesn't mean I'm voting for Democrats, but it does mean I'm also no longer voting for Democrats calling themselves Republicans. But Steve, some of you will say, at least a bad Republican is better than a good Democrat. If by now you haven't realized that a bad Republican and a good Democrat are one and the same, immediately go back to page 1 and start rereading the book. But Steve, some of you will say, in our system majority rules, so even a bad Republican will still vote Republican for leadership positions. So what? Why in the Sam Hill should I care if John Boehner or Nancy Pelosi is Speaker of the House? Not once, not twice, not thrice, but 4 times in 2013, Boehner allowed bills to pass out of the House of Representatives a majority of Republicans didn't vote for. 2 of those were the largest tax increase in the last 20 years and the largest tax increase of all time, Obamacare. So what's the point of having a majority then? At least when Pelosi is giving us failed policies and statism, I can blame it on her and the Democrats, and then recruit good candidates to challenge them in the next election. Bad Republicans are actually worse than Democrats in that respect because they depress the conservative base and make it harder to get our people engaged. Think about it. Are you more eager to take on the perp who breaks into your house and threatens your loyal and loving wife, or the disloyal wife you found out was cheating on you? One situation spurs you to act on your God-given masculine instinct. The other rips your still beating heart from your chest and demoralizes you. I agree success in our system is based on building coalitions, but those have to be coalitions of the willing. What is the point in giving Ditch McConnell or Lindsey Grahamnesty another 6 years in the United States Senate? Why would I align myself, even temporarily, with someone who has more in common with Democrats than with me, especially when they come from red states like Kentucky and South Carolina? Who cares if the Democrat wins in those sorts of places? Because they'll be easier to beat in the next election in those states. But let a Republican like Ditch McConnell become an entrenched incumbent, and you'll suffer under his gangster government for decades. See, adults don't need instant gratification. Children do. Adults put off instant gratification because they see the bigger picture. Children get emotionally manipulated to act upon what's best right now, without any perspective. Granted, if a Scott Brown is the best you can do in the bluest of blue states like Massachusetts, so be it. But as groups like Club for Growth and Madison Project point out, there's no reason not to have a real conservative as the senator to every red state and the congressman to every red district. I say we start building from there, and then it's easier to keep the squishes of the world like Scott Brown in line once elected, when they're surrounded by a caucus led by the likes of Ted Cruz and not Ditch McConnell. There are some simple Notice I didn't say easy, steps to actually forging a real opposition party in America again. Before making the decades-long investment in a viable third party, why not try this? We don't have to be mascots for the GOP, but simply use the GOP as a means to an end when it suits us. I'm not talking about reforming the Republican Party, because it's well beyond that now. I'm talking about essentially running a party within a party and using them the way they've used us for years, and only on our terms. Stop treating the GOP like a religious cult. Let's reevaluate our relationship with the party and make it less personal and more businesslike. When your employees don't do the job you hired them to do, you don't feel emotionally betrayed and then close up shop. No, you simply fire them and get better employees. This party isn't deserving of our emotions, nor is it worth the salt in our tears. And no political party ever has been. No matter where we go or what we build, we'll eventually manifest the same problems. Trust me, I'm an evangelical. We break up churches and start new denominations all the time, believing that this time we'll get it right. But we forget the problem is ultimately us. Someone once asked G.K. Chesterton, "What's wrong with the world?" He gave them a one-word answer: me. Our nature is fallen, as is all of creation. The Republican Party, or any organization or institution for that matter, is only as good as the people inhabiting it. When we turn a political party into a church and politicians into angels/demigods, we're asking for the very same disappointment we have received. Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar, and render unto God that which is God's. Do not give Caesar your conscience or virtue. That belongs to God. When Caesar demands either, he's demanding you recognize him as God, and we should have a simple answer for that. No. We don't contort our moral values into a pretzel to justify voting for another Republican hack. We demand that Republican hack meet our standard for hiring, or heaven hath no fury like the next primary cycle. Speaking of primaries, they are the most immediate route to move the country right. In many places, we in the grassroots outnumber the establishment. So as long as we actively and smartly participate in the primary process, replacing these Republicrats is not nearly as hard as we've been led to believe. But for too long, we have ignored the primary process at our own peril. So we're now at the point that the primary really is the election. For if the wrong kind of Republican wins the primary, the general election becomes a moot point. If you're aligned with a conservative or libertarian organization that isn't willing to take a strong and public stand in primaries, get out now. More than likely, they are little more than caretakers for the ruling class, running their own shadow incumbent protection program. Primaries separate the men from the boys. Primaries tell us who's here to really take on the system and who's here to be a part of the system. Seriously, I think if we just did those two things, stopped being partisan loyalists and started participating in primaries en masse, we'd be amazed at how much positive change we could see based off that alone. And that's something you can do even if you want to belong to a third party and not be a full-time Republican. Many states allow you to vote in open primaries or register on the same day as the event. Why not go in, vote for the best constitutional conservative on the ballot, and then get back out if you want? Barack Obama is correct about one thing. We are the people we've been waiting for. Change for the better is not going to come from the top down beginning in Washington, D.C. Change is only going to come from the bottom up when we in the grassroots get mad enough to make it happen. Get mad. Stay mad. Now in your anger, we do not sin. But anger can be a powerful and virtuous motivator when under control. Like when a mama grizzly is angry that a predator threatens her babies. Like when a father is angry that a perpetrator threatens his family. Like when a loving but holy God is angry at what sin has done to his creation. The system is counting on our complacency. And if we're being honest, we have to admit to ourselves, it has every reason to. But we've always been the ones in charge. We've always outnumbered them. We've just been unwilling to act like it. Now is the time for that action. The clock is ticking on these United States of America. The last best hope for human freedom this side of Eden is on the brink of becoming a footnote in human history. Do you want to be the generation that has to look our children in the eye and explain why liberty died? Not on my watch. Who's with me?
And that was Rules for Patriots, How Conservatives Can Win Again by Steve Deese. The thing that he's missing here is that doing the primaries is a good idea, and it's the only way you can really affect change, because if you try to vote the other alternative, of course, is wait for the general election, vote against the Republican, but then you end up with giving it to a Democrat. And that's counterproductive. So it has to be the primary. The problem is that if you have somebody like, let's say, Mitch McConnell, and he wants to continue in office, no Republican in his state is going to challenge him. He's got too much power, too much clout. The Republican Party in that state and at the federal level is going to discourage it. They may even just tell any Republican that tries to, guess what? If you even think about it, we'll terminate your career. You'll get no money from us in your next reelection campaign. So what do? Simple. As I've said before, the thing to do is everybody with the last name McConnell, every man, woman, child, farmer, whatever, the last name of McConnell registers for the primary, in the Republican primary. Cost you $50 and 5 signatures. And you go in and you put yourself on the ballot. Now, if Mitch McConnell is running against 5 other McConnells, the race now becomes a de facto recall movement. Now, Republican office holders can get into the race to rescue the Republican Party from what will surely be a disaster. And the nice thing about doing it this way is it puts every politician, Republican or Democrat or independent, on Capitol Hill on notice. They know that they cannot be leaders and change agents anymore. They must return to being representatives, act like representatives, pay attention to their constituents, or face losing their office. Back in a minute. Thank you. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that determinism is optional.